In this video, we'll show you how to use the cross-project tools in Copilot for ALM. Start by running the Copilot Launchpad application from your desktop. On the Launchpad, click on the Cross-Project Tools button. On the main screen, log into your server. Note that you don't log into your project, you only log into the server. There are 3 sets of tools in this application. Let's start with the cross-project tools themselves, which are used for comparing projects and templates. Let's compare the users between multiple projects. From the menu, select the cross-project users report. Then choose the projects that you want to compare. For our demonstration, we've created a number of different projects. We'll choose 4 that we want to compare. After you've selected your projects, click the Run Comparison button and then wait for the report to finish. In the console at the bottom, you can see when the job has finished. Click the Results tab to see the side-by-side comparison of users and the projects they can access. We can see that Alice, Cecil, and James have access to all projects except for Project 2. This is the basic idea behind the Cross-Project Tools module. Let's move on to groups. As before, we're going to select our target projects and run the comparison to show us the different groups in each one. Let's wait a few seconds before we look at our output. Notice the differences. In Project 2, we're missing the defect reporter role, and in Project 3, someone added a new group for members of the PMO team. We should probably have a PMO group in all projects for consistency, but that isn't the case here. Ensuring consistency of groups across projects is important. We don't want 20 different sets of permissions for developers in our organization. Many workflows and process flows in ALM are tied to groups. So without commonality, it is difficult to have reusable workflows and transition rules. Next, let's check the user mapping report. This report is more complicated because it looks at users by group. We want users to be mapped to groups consistently based on their role within the organization. For example, we shouldn't have a developer be assigned to a tester role and vice versa because they are fundamentally different roles. In the report output, we can see each user and their group mapping by project, and we can also see which ones are assigned to multiple roles. Multi-role assignments are not a good practice in ALM for reasons we'll discuss later. Now let's run a group permissions comparison. Here, we will select the same 4 projects to compare, and then the permissions that we want to report on. This is different than the other reports because it generates a lot of information and can take a long time to run. That's why we filter by permission. For our example, let's find out which groups can delete information in ALM. We'll select the delete permission and then run this report against all 4 projects. This report would be very time-consuming to compile manually. This report works differently than the previous ones, and it can be quite busy. So let's maximize the window so that we can see all of the information that has been generated. The report lists all of the different entities by row. Entities such as requirements, tests, and bugs. The columns show each project and group, and whether they have the delete permission or not. Let's filter the report to look at just the bug and runs table, so that we can confirm which groups can delete defects and test runs. Ideally, delete permissions should be granted to only a few users in a project. I can immediately see that many groups have permissions to delete that they really shouldn't have. For example, defect reporter role. What we would do in this situation is use Copilot's export capabilities to save this information to Microsoft Excel and then share with stakeholders to confirm the permissions they want on these entities. And finally, let's look at our entities settings. This is where the majority of inconsistencies arise. I want to see whether there's any custom fields in our entities and look for anomalies. We'll start by looking at the bug table entity. Entity checking is important for 3 reasons. 1. for data capture and reporting. 2. For proper execution of workflow. And 3. For cross-project reporting and dashboards. Here we can see that the bug table is not consistent across projects. There is an additional user-defined field in Project 3. This may not be serious, but it might require updating in other projects before it poses an issue. Project 4 seems to have one field that doesn't match the ones in the other projects, which would be a problem for both workflow execution and for cross-project ALM reports and dashboards. Policy tools are meant to check for permission conflicts due to misapplication of group membership or group permissions. Let's start with user policies. In the User Policies panel, there are 4 policy rules we're checking. 1. To see if users are mapped to multiple groups. 2. To see if a user is mapped to multiple groups with one of them being a viewer. 3. Whether they're mapped to multiple groups, including the TD admin role. And 4. Whether any users are still mapped to the default groups in ALM. This way we can catch conflicts and issues that could affect reports, workflow, and of course even access to data. Let's run the report to check our projects against these policies. The report will take about a minute to run, but could be longer if you have many more projects to process. The result is a table which shows which users pass or fail the specific policy rule. The rows represent the users, and the columns are the projects and policies that we're checking. The checkboxes indicate whether they pass or fail the policy. Notice there are several users that are failing these policy rules. These should be corrected so that we can save ourselves problems down the road. Now let's look at group policies. Similar to the user policies report, we're checking for permissions at a group level. There are 3 policies we're checking. 1. To see if a group has permission to delete defects they don't own. 2. Whether they can delete a test run without being the owner. And 3. Whether they're able to do customizations such as project lists. So let's run the report to see how we stack up. We'll give it about a minute to process. Just like the user policy report, this report shows the pass or fail result of the policy checks, but by group instead of by user. Notice how almost all groups are failing these basic checks. They are able to delete records that they don't own. In most situations, this shouldn't be allowed except for groups like managers or the TD admin role. Now let's look at the data tools, starting with the entity counts report. This lets you quickly count the number of records for the key entities in your ALM projects. It's helpful when doing any major change to an ALM project or deployment, such as a project schema upgrade, purging of records, a project copy, or even a project repair. By running this report before and then after the change, you can be satisfied that the record counts are correct. Another report the data tools can provide is a count of entity customizations. As you saw in Copilot's Customization Tools module, you can get a summary of customizations in a single project. This is a scaled-up version of that report to know whether there have been any additional customizations since the last time the report was run. That concludes our walkthrough of the cross-project tools in Copilot for ALM. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, please reach out to us directly.